can you actually test for stress in your body?
Yes, you absolutely can test for stress over your body, especially if you're over 40. You need to be doing it. There are specific fingerprints or things that we could check in your blood, your urine, your saliva, etc., that tells us how you're doing with your stress.
So it's not always just something that is like a felt sensation that no one can measure. It's all in my head and everyone's different. It's like, no, like what you're feeling is not just in your head. It's a physiological a thing that's happening in your body. And there are measurable tools that can measure how much of it is happening in yours compared to somebody else, which I find to be fascinating. So when it comes to the difference between like we have emotional stress and then we have like physical stress in our lives. How do these affect our body in a way that is measurable?
Yeah, so emotional and physical stress are measured the same in the body. So there's specific tests that we can do to measure these. And what we're going to be looking at is cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and then we could look at other hormones like DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, because these are all made from the adrenal glands. And when the adrenal glands start to get taxed from all the stress that's going on, there's fluctuations that happen in these hormones. So yeah, we could start looking specifically at specific hormones like cortisol and norepinephrine or epinephrine. Those are some blood work that we can do. We could do check it through urine and saliva also. We could also be looking at some other things like heart rate variability, in which we can use that Oura Ring or an Apple Watch or other devices that can tell you about your heart rate variability. That will tell us about your stress response and how you're dealing with stress. It'll give us a good look at how your autonomic nervous system is working, and stress affects how our autonomic nervous system is working. So it gives us a good look at what's going on there. So if you have a low heart rate variability, it's telling us, there's something that we need to do for your stress response. Some other things that we could possibly look at is we could look at your sleep, your heart rate, etc. These are all done with these devices too, like an Oura Ring, Apple Watch, etc. That can tell us how you're doing with your stress.
So I know when I was working with you, one of the things we looked at was cortisol. So what are some of the best lab tests to measure specifically the stress's impact on your cortisol and whether or not you have a cortisol imbalance?
So some tests that we can do to really check how our cortisol is doing. I like to do a diurnal cortisol. So this is checking cortisol morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime. I many times do this through cortisol. That's a great way to do it. It's something that you do at home in your normal state of mind at home. And you check it morning, right when you wake up. You check it in the afternoon, evening, and right before you go to bed. We could also do
Hold
a
on
urine
one second,
test.
Dr. Jake. Dr. Jake, I really wanted to get clarity on this. So when we're at home doing this particular cortisol test, are we urinating or what are we using so that you can measure this from when we're at home, morning, afternoon, evening, and so forth?
So when you're at home, there's several tests that you can do. My favorite one is a cortisol, a salivary or a urine. So you could do a diurnal cortisol salivary test, or you could also do what's called a Dutch test, which is a urine test that you can do that checks your cortisol, but then it also checks all kinds of other hormones. It also checks your pituitary gland, how that's working, and the axis between your HPA axis, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So those are some tests that we could do to get a good look at your cortisol at home. And those are usually my favorite. You can do blood tests. And usually my favorite way to do a blood test is a first morning urine. Obviously, you're missing out on a lot of different things on that afternoon, evening, and nighttime that are very important. But that is the most important one. We do it like at 8 a.m. and get a look at what your cortisol is doing. And that will tell us if you're making too much or too little. It gives us a basic look at what's going on with your cortisol there. And it's not as expensive, much cheaper, and many times can be covered by insurance. So it gives us a pretty good look. And I do that for patients periodically with that.
So, question there, Dr. Jake. So, it seems like the first option for cortisol is a saliva-based test, and it measures just your cortisol window. And you look at it morning, afternoon, evening, and I'm assuming you spit, on the test itself. And that measures just the cortisol. And then the second option is doing a Dutch test. And this one, you're using your urine. It'll measure your cortisol, but it'll also measure other things to give a bigger picture of what's going on with your stress system. And that might include also your DHEA, your sex hormones, what's happening, how is it affecting your estrogen, how is it affecting your progesterone and testosterone, melatonin, and things like that. And then it seemed like this last one was blood. So do they come into your office in the morning and then they come back at night and you draw blood from them both times, or how would that work?
So yeah, so a blood test, typically what I'm doing is just a first morning urine because it doesn't make a lot of sense to be checking blood all the time throughout the day. So if I am going to use blood as a cortisol test, we're doing a first morning test to get a general idea because it can give us some information of, okay, you're making too little cortisol. Which morning cortisol is the most important, and then evening cortisol. So the morning cortisol could give us a general idea. Are you making too much cortisol? Or are you making too little? But again, it just doesn't give us enough information. So it's not what I usually do in my office. I usually like to do these other tests, like a spit test, which is checking it at home, or the Dutch test. They're
Got
much
it.
better than the blood test, but it does give us some pretty good information. It's a very cheap test, and we could put that in like just a general wellness blood draw, and it could give us some good information regarding your cortisol as a well-being type of thing. But if you're really dealing with a ton of stress, I recommend doing a spit test or a urine test at home.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So for those of you who are listening and you want to get your a test done, whether you do the saliva or the urine or a blood based off of, your particular needs, what Dr. Jake recommends, or what you maybe you're basing it only on what your insurance will provide, any of those options, you can schedule a call with Dr. Jake, a free 15-minute call to talk about what this process might look like, and then go from there. We have a link down in the description box for whether you're listening to this on the podcast or on YouTube. It's drjakewellness.com/schedule, and you can go from there. Now, Dr. Jake, what else outside of labs? Like what sort of wearable devices can somebody use? You had mentioned earlier in this episode a bit about wearing wearable devices that could also help you determine or someone to be able to see how stress is impacting their body.
Yeah, so there are wearable devices that we could use, like an Oura Ring, Apple Watch, a Whoop, etc. These things measure what's called HRV, heart rate variability, which gives us a really good look at how cortisol is working and a deep look at our autonomic nervous system. So if we're really stressed out, it is going to affect our autonomic nervous system, which is then going to affect our heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is based on it's what it is, right? Heart rate, changes in our heart rate. So if we have a disturbance in our autonomic nervous system, which we don't control at all, right? Except we can stress ourselves out. We can control maybe a little bit, but we don't control a lot of that. But we get stress that causes a disturbance there. And we can pick that up through these wearable devices because it's checking your heart rate all day long. And it can see, oh, where's your variability there? Is there a lot of change? Or is it just staying all the same? That's telling us, wait, your autonomic nervous system isn't working very well. And that's giving us a good look at what is happening with your cortisol. So I really like using that. And you can see that, oh, wait, my heart rate variability has been really low the past couple of weeks. What have I been doing that's stressing my body? Maybe I need to make some changes. So I really like these for tracking stress in that way. I like to do a combination of the blood work and these wearable devices to really get a good look at how you're dealing with stress and how is it affecting you.
That makes a lot of sense. I know for me, I got the Aura Ring about 4 years ago when my husband was first diagnosed with cancer. He got one for him because he started looking into seeing like, well, how could sleep and how could HRV and those types of things be helping me on my healing journey with cancer? And so I was like, well, I like to do the same thing for me just to take care of my health. And I have been able to see in average HRV that I have, and I definitely notice that it drops when I'm sick, when I'm overly stressed. I've had a stressful week when I didn't sleep well. Those types of things I notice seem to definitely impact my stress and can make it worse. So it's weird. It's like stress will impact my sleep, and then sleep then impacts my HRV. So you can see how it can all relate to one another. But it's been very helpful information just to kind of see patterns in myself and be able to even start making goals for myself on improving it. Now, so we've discussed cortisol testing, saliva, urine, blood, different ones. They all have pros and cons. We discussed wearable devices that can check your HRV, and you like to do a combination. What are some other types of blood markers, labs that you like to look at to just get a bigger picture of how your stress could be impacting other areas of your body?
Yeah, so other blood work that we can do is we can take a look at other hormones besides just cortisol. So we talked a little bit about DHEA. This is a big piece of how your adrenal glands are working. So we make DHEA in the adrenal glands. We make most of our cortisol in adrenal glands, DHEA there also. So if DHEA starts to get lower, it's telling me, wait, you're under long-term stress, and we need to take care of that and get your DHEA up some way and make modifications to your stress and treat it accordingly. Also, when you're chronically stressed, it will affect your testosterone and your estrogen and your progesterone, and it will affect your thyroid. So we want to look at all those and see if there's dysregulations happening with those hormones, and that could tell us how your body's being stressed. Some other things that we could check besides this blood work that are really cool about the wearable devices too is we could track your sleep wake cycles. We could track to see your resting heart rate when you're actually going to sleep or when you wake up. That's telling us how stressed you are too. Like if you're going to bed and your heart rate's staying up before you go to sleep, that's telling us, wait, you're stressed all day long and you're not calming down at all. And then we could also look at your sleep wake cycles. Are you waking up a lot throughout the night? And these wearable devices can give us a look at that too. So we have so many different markers in the world we live in now to really see how you're dealing with your stress and if there's something that we need to do for it.
So then, Dr. Jake, for women over 40 especially, we've broken down a lot of different types of tests that we can take to help get a picture of what we're doing. What would you say in order? What would be the best test for a woman over the age of 40, if you really wanted to get a good picture of the stress and whether or not it's impacting their body and their health?
Yeah, I think the best test to really get a good look at how stress is affecting your body is a Dutch test. Because what this is doing is it's looking at your cortisol throughout the day, a 24-hour period gives it a great look there. It looks at cortisol and cortisone, active and non-active cortisol. It also looks at the hormones that we just talked about, DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and it checks those throughout the day also, which can fluctuate. It also checks it at the appropriate cycles, which is really great too, because if you're still cycling, if you're in your 40s, usually you're still cycling even up to your mid 50s, you need to check your hormones at a certain time of the month so that can do that. So it gives us a lot of great information on all pieces that are dealing with your stress. So I love the Dutch test. Second one I like to do is it's a cortisol test that we do through the saliva. And this is you check your cortisol first thing in the morning, you do it in the afternoon, evening, and right before you go to bed. And many times I do a combination of like a salivary cortisol test, but I do blood draw of hormones too, like of the estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, and thyroid. And that works really well too. So that's a really good combination for that to see where your stress is at. And then the least important, I think the worst of them all, but still good information, is doing a blood cortisol, first morning blood cortisol. And then we talked about the wearables, and those those are all really important too. I'd probably put that third place instead of the blood work, as really knowing what's going on with your stress and how's cortisol affecting you.
So it sounds like a great combination would be, if someone's listening to this, is like go in, see Dr. Jake, get a Dutch test. If you have a wearable device, great. Give that information to Dr. Jake as well, as far as where your HRV is and sleep. That'll help him get a big picture of, okay, here's what you get out of your Dutch. Here's how it's affecting your sleep, and here how it's affecting your HRV. Get some blood work done for, your CRP and your insulin and your thyroid to see how that's happening. And then you get this incredible picture of what's happening in your body with your cortisol and how it's affecting your hormones and other areas of your body and your nervous system. Great picture. And then he can come up with a plan for you. So building a protocol obviously is going to look different for everybody. Can you kind of just overview? I know you're going to dig into this more into our next video, but can you kind of give an overview of like, what do you do based off of whether they came out with high cortisol, low cortisol, HRV low, like what's your next steps if that happens?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of things that are going to be going on, and you get a different treatment based on everything. So you could be producing someone that's producing cortisol all day long, morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime. And we're going to give some calming adaptogens at that point to chill the adrenal glands out. But you could be someone that's actually making too little cortisol. And then we want to give you some more stimulating herbs, or maybe if you're really bad, hydrocortisone, low dose hydrocortisone, to really get that cortisol back up and wake up those adrenal glands, get them working appropriately how they should. And then maybe you're someone that makes too much at night, but you make too little in the morning. So we actually need to do a combination. We need to calm you down. We need to give some herbs, adaptogens, calm you down at night, but we need to give you some stimulation in the morning. So all variable type of herbs herbs or nutrients or maybe certain medications to really treat the stress response and adrenal fatigue that might be going on. Yeah, if you want to learn more about how to de-stress, what specific treatments that you need to do to be able to treat high cortisol, low cortisol, etc., click my videos to the right. I'm Dr. Jake, and I'll see you there.